And let me tell you why we're talking about this. There's some things I want to be sure and hit on. But this came out of a Facebook discussion in the Robinson group where people were really wrestling, honestly wrestling with kids that are struggling with math. And we've had one or two, I'd call two, that struggle with math. One of them I didn't think needed to. You finally straightened them out in business calculus in college, you remember?
Yeah,
Brooks
and
tutored his older
sister-in-law.
brother, his 3 years older brother, and I think he got his math pretty straight. Um, Laura, not as much. She'd admit that, but the lessons we learn in this process have really stood up to time. So, if your kids have whizzed through math in college, I think you're going to validate what I say, and I want to give you an opportunity to come in and share something. But if your kids struggle, I want to invite you to rethink maybe what you're doing, because there's a good probability. Here's my conviction. I think everybody of average intelligence or better can do fine in math, certainly up to a point. Algebra 1, algebra 2, they can do it. It can be done. But the trick is you've got to approach it differently than you do other subjects. It's not given to learning the same way. I'm going to explain that in a moment. We're going to get Brooks and Jody's input on that, since they both have experienced this. Bear in mind, I'm Dr. Fred Lybrand, my wife Jody. We homeschooled all five of our kids. Brooks is the youngest, and all the way from birth to college, and they're all college graduates almost. Holmes is coming up, and Brooks, is a little bit of time out since he just started his freshman year. I wanted to throw out why math is important. This is a starter problem, because what kids tend to say is, "Oh, I'll never use it." You ever heard that, Brooks?
Yes. Plenty of time,
So
even still.
yeah, this morning, and even in school, and this morning at the crack of dawn, when I was up early around 5 or so, every day I try to make a list of 10 items. It's just a habit I'm trying to develop to keep my brain open to fresh ideas. And so I made a list: 10 reasons math is important. And actually I stopped at 11, so here they are. 10 reasons math is important. Number one, it saves you money. I promise you, if you can do math, you're going to save yourself money, especially if you can learn to read a bill. It happens with some degree of frequency. Not too long ago, Jody and I were somewhere, and the bill just didn't add up. There are other such situations where it's been that way. And if you can do math quickly in your head, you can figure out how to save money. You can figure out percentages. You can figure out options. I remember going to a movie theater one time in Alabama, and you could buy two smalls and get like 50% more than one big drink. I don't know why they had it all reversed, but I could do the math and got more Coke or whatever. Number two, math, reasons math's important, is it protects you from cons and from error. In other words, there are a lot of people that can con you and trick you, especially in statistics. And if you know math, you don't get tricked as easily on prices, on statistics, on what people think they're saying, what they think something means. Third, it improves your logic. Math is fundamentally a logical function, so it improves your ability to work with cause and effect and reason. And thinking things through and using logic is pretty awesome for your life. Number four, math teaches you how to see truth. You're able to, with math, be forced to look at things objectively, not just through your experience, not just what does it mean to me, but instead you have the opportunity to look at things objectively, realize if something's wrong, how to make it right. Fifth, knowing math will make you money, both in employment and advancement in careers, in just knowing how to invest, figure out things. It's similar to the save money thing, but there are ways in which once you know a little math, it can actually generate income for you. I mean, Brooks is generating a good bit of income because of his math background, and then he's added some computer stuff, and he's paid better per hour than I probably was the first 44 years of my life, something like that, hourly. Six, it opens up other worlds to you. when you know math, there are worlds that can open up both academically and practically of what you can interact with and understand in news and life. 7, 10 reasons math is important. Number 7, it's necessary, I think, to be educated, to be a genuinely educated individual. I'm not talking about necessarily college, but to be able to interact and talk as an educated human being. Math is necessary because it's too much a part of this world. Number 8, it gives you an advantage in thinking and negotiating. So whenever you're interacting with people, because of this logic component, because of math components, you're able to negotiate more effectively because you understand things in a more profound way. Number 9, it's a math world. So in talking and in functioning in this world, it's just a mathematical world, and it's going to get worse. Brooks will tell you about that. Everything's going to go to robots and algorithms before long. So and maybe we get lazy with math then, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it's a math world right now. Number 10, not only a math world, but it's just especially a math world. Number 10, it makes you a better guesser. This comes in handy. You know, once you know odds and the way the game works, you can make better guesses about things in life. And number 11, you must have math for any science-related career. Not even just the STEM stuff, but even, you know, watching Alyssa with nursing, I know that there's a significant amount of math that went with that with our daughter-in-law. So just to have certain kinds of careers, there's going to be a certain level of math that's required. I just say all that to just throw out, I just made up a list this morning. There are probably a lot more. Brooks, if you have one you want to throw in, or Jody, do it right now.
I mean, I wasn't prepared, but it definitely, I think everything you're saying makes sense, especially just it opens up a lot more opportunities and allows you to just think about things. I also just say, I don't know, if you can take on math and not be scared of it, it's going to help you in so many things that you won't even be aware of. Like you're saying, like economics is in the liberal arts department of the University of Texas. And a lot of people where they struggle is when you're asked to just calculate something very simple. But the people who, you know, if you have a good background in math, even things like economics, which is in liberal arts, just becomes a lot easier. It really does open a lot of doors. So I just want to emphasize on that specific point.
Exactly. And by the way, this is designed for everyone to interact on the side. I'm seeing very nice things mentioned here. You know, someone points out that there's a fear of math thing. It improves writing due to the use of logic. I think that's true. But as it's just integrating so many things. And I guess I left out confidence. You know, once you can teach yourself math and learn that you can be afraid and not understand it and then go to understanding, you do that enough times, you start thinking, I could probably learn anything, which might actually be true. Okay. So there are 4 keys that I kind of want to talk about today, and I'm going to talk about practical things and then take questions, etc. But we're wanting to focus on how you teach math in such a way that children can actually learn. And my premise, and Brooks and I talked about this a little bit this weekend. My premise is that one of the problems you have if your children are struggling with math, besides having an assumption that there are some people made for math and some people are not, which simply can't be true because you're made for logic. We know you're made for logic because you all come up with great arguments for why you're going to buy something. So already we know you have some kind of logic chip in operation. But it would be just as easy to say you're not made for reading. You know, reading's just not one of my subjects. Well, there are people that are poor readers, but it's not because you can't read. If you can do language, you can do reading. The challenge is you haven't gone through a process to hook your brain up properly, and it's very similar to that in math. But there's a fundamental difference, and this is the first key I want to mention. The first key issue here is that math is progressive in the way it's learned, not lateral. Okay, so I'm going to explain what this means. Lateral thinking is linear thinking is when things go in order. The little if this. Okay, that's the way logic can play out. Lateral is when you take this piece and this piece and this piece, and it shapes a pattern. So when you look at a picture, for example, you're actually seeing a pattern. That's a lateral tendency. It's kind of a right brain. You might talk that way. I mean, we use our whole brain, so it's not entirely accurate. But lateral thinking is when it's to the sides, okay? So connecting things, hey, chocolate and peanut butter, Reese's peanut butter cup, okay? That's lateral thinking. That's a lot of what genius does. And if your child's great at arts and even music is mathematical too. It's kind of where these two worlds meet, I would say. But you have the opportunity to understand that this lateral approach is really quite incredible. But math is not lateral. It's progressive. It goes step by step by step. I'm gonna reemphasize these because my second key is that math is logical, not patterned. I know math looks at patterns. I'm not denying that. I understand. But in learning math, it's really a logical building process. You get this basic piece, you add this piece, you add this piece, and you build, which goes to the third key, which is it's stair-stepped and not gestalt. Okay. I'm fixing to make sense. Just hang in there, okay? First key is progressive and not lateral. Second key, it's logical, not patterned. Third key, it's stair-stepped and not gestalt. And what that means is we can create gaps and understand patterns and figure out the pattern. So in reading, you can kind of be halfway asleep through a novel, but then wake up for the last half and know what happens and figure out what happened earlier, even if you didn't read it, because all of that has to fit together. Reading, you can almost cheat. Honestly, I can show you, I can pick up something and read 20% of what's in front of me and tell you the whole thing because I know how to fill in those gaps. It's a lateral gestalt type function. This presents a problem because it goes to the fourth key. And the fourth key is that you can't make sense later. If you teach math like you teach reading, that eventually it'll come together, or writing, that later you can pull in a few points that tie back the early ones, or you're reading something and it doesn't make sense, but the later part makes sense, the conclusion, so you piece it together. You can do that with reading. It's very powerful. There are other kinds of things you can do that with, not math. You cannot later in math think that, oh, it'll come together. I'm going to catch on later. Eventually it'll make sense. I got news for you. If it doesn't make sense today, the advanced stuff tomorrow won't make sense. I remember working with a young man not too long ago who was, it's probably been 2 years now, but he was really doing bad, flunking things. And I got him to do, his mom and his dad reinforced doing exactly what I had them do. He went back, did it. He's excelled, did really well in his SAT. Now he caught himself up within 2 years, and this is like a 16 to 18-year-old. Isn't that right, Jody? He was about that age. Okay. So what I'm getting at here is that math requires getting the basic principle before you can get the next principle, before you can get the next principle, before you can get the next principle. So it becomes pretty obvious what you have to do. You have to quit thinking they're going to catch on later. No one will catch on later. Okay, I can't say this more intensely. There may be an exception out there, and praise the Lord for that weird genius. But you know what? All the rest of us on the planet will not catch on later. If you don't understand, what'd you say, Brooks, this weekend about you got to get down that there's variables and something's missing? How'd you say that?
Yeah, well, I was mostly talking about algebra. A lot of friends who kind of failed calculus last year or were struggling with it didn't know their algebra, and that was a big reason. And kind of the point is, if you can't understand the concept of, there's a missing variable and you have to figure out how to get that variable and what it is, which is all that algebra kind of is, at least in those early stages, then you're not going to be able to understand a lot of what comes out from math, because a lot of it is just there's something missing, we don't know, and what is it?
Exactly. That's exactly the nature of the game. And if you don't get that down, that you have a missing variable and the ways to play around to figure it out, Sometimes it's angles, you know, and there's certain principles if you understand about how angles parallelograms, etc., or the sum of the area, you know, the angles and what they equal inside of a triangle or square, etc. Once you know these pieces, you can start figuring out all kinds of things, because what math is basically problem solving built on understanding the rules of the game. I promise you, your child who struggles with math, it's like they're trying to play card game. We talked about this week, Jody, like spades or hearts, or I don't know what games are out there, but some card game, but they don't know the rules of the game. And so they're getting these cards, they don't know what to do with them. So they try something and try something, and they can't show their work, can't make sense of it. They've got to know the rules of the game to be able to play the game effectively. And math has got to work in that linear process. So with all this said, practically speaking, what does it suggest you have to do? The answer is you got to go back. They've got to start back. And I'm going to tell you, say it, what, Jody?
You've got to find out where they stopped, where there was a gap, where there, and you have to go back. And
yeah, you got to figure out what's missing.
What's missing.
So actually, say it again. I'm sorry.
No, that's correct.
Yeah, so you've got to find out what's missing. And the easiest way to do it, to me, is just to go back to the place where they really understand it. Because here's the game. They don't understand, and they're going to understand. This is how math works. Everything's hard before it's easy, but it's easy once you know how. Children before 5, 4, something like that, don't have a brain for math. If you have an exception, more power to you. But children just simply don't. There's no real correlation between doing well in math early, which America does great in, and doing math really well later, which America does not. Your brain has to be ready, but then you have to learn the principles, and that is where the challenge is. And so, what I want to do before I open it up to questions and y'all's comments, I just want to share basically my 4-step solution to you. Okay, so my 4-step plan for what I would recommend that you do, and it goes like this. Number 1, if you have a child that's struggling in math, and by the way, let me just stress, in my mind, if they learn, let's say there are 100 really key principles. Brooks, do you know how many there are?
Depends what subject you're talking about.
I don't know, but let's say algebra 1. They're probably 20 or 30 things you just really need to know.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Schools want you to.
Honestly, if they really knew 5 and really knew them, that would open up a whole much more of their math world than poorly knowing 10. Really knowing 5 in math is better than poorly knowing 10. And that's what I'm trying to get at. So the starting place is this. You need to figure out where they really are. And you do that by testing them. And you can do it. You can give them problems and you can see if they can do them. If they can't do them, they can't do them. And by the way, I don't like to think of fractions and derivative. I don't like to think of the pieces. I like to think of math. I think you're much better off thinking of math. You either know math or not, rather than geometry and if I'm good at this and I'm good at that. No. It's just all math, y'all. So you want to first figure out where they really are, and you can give them tests. You can go back and get them to work problems. You can find out about where they are. They're at the beginning of algebra. They're about algebra 1/2 level. They're somewhere. Maybe it's even earlier, just elementary stuff. This is, by the way, why we like to do math facts first. All of y'all had to do all those math facts and just learn them. We didn't care we didn't want you to count on your fingers. We didn't want you to understand them. All we wanted you to do is know 7 times 3 is 21, right? That's what we wanted. It was just a fact. You knew Aunt Linda's name. Her name was Linda. You knew 7 times 3 is 21. It's just facts. There's nothing else to it, but that's a foundational piece that helps as well. So first, you figure out where they really are. Second, you start there. That means you go back and you really learn it. Third, you insist that learning one principle well is better than pretending to learn 20 principles okay. different way of saying what I said a minute ago. Learning one principle well is better than learning 20 principles okay. That's what you're trying to do to get them to whatever level you can by the time they graduate high school. Some will excel, some may not, but whatever they get to, they should really know that. That's what they know. And maybe it's just algebra half, but a student that really knew algebra 1, they really knew it. They have such a greater world of opportunities ahead of them than someone who's gotten through algebra 2 and hardly knows it, hardly understands. So those are the pieces. I have a fourth one. 1, figure out where they really are. Start there. 3, insist learning one principle well is better than pretending to learn 20 principles okay. And then number 4, and by the way, this is mindset, right? So number 4, I think you want to follow basically the Robinson curriculum method. And the method is the way we did it. It's to maintain 90%, 95 technically, but sometimes if they're doing too few problems, you can't get 95 out of that. So 90 seemed to be fine for us. You want them to do a certain amount of work every day. We did 2 hours. We eventually started breaking it up into 2-hour separated hour segments to avoid brain fatigue. But you want to basically have them work on math for a couple hours a day. Or if you can start at 30 minutes, start there. Just grow. Some is good, more is better in this regard. You want them to maintain a 90% on average. It'd be like a week average or maybe 2. Maybe if you drop below and sometimes you're above, that's fine. But if they're consistently hitting below 90, then what you want to do is slow down. Honestly, if they did one problem right every day, I was happier than doing 5 problems wrong. There's no magic in learning if they're not getting things correct. And then finally, when you slow down, go to maybe a half lesson. Maybe it's just 10 problems. Whatever number of problems they can do in whatever period of time you assign and maintain a 90% or better, then you got it made. And of course, when they miss things, they go back and rework those problems so they understand it. And then if they are starting to get through a half an hour early, you need to add problems because they need to maintain that challenge level. That's the nature of math. And I'll mention this too, finally. When children miss math problems or any student misses a math problem, it's one of 2 things every time. They either are careless or they don't understand what they're doing. If they're careless, then you want to encourage them to get more careful. If they don't know what they're doing, that's when they've got to slow down and make it happen. Now, I would tell them that the kids basically, Jody and I did very little teaching of math to them. Isn't that true, Brooks?
Sorry, I was muted there.
You with me?
Yes.
That's all right.
Yeah, for the majority, it was us teaching ourselves.
Yeah, sometimes they'd help each other. They would debate things, or they'd come to me, and I always did the same thing. I would say, so if it was something very obvious, I'd say, now what exactly is that number? And then they'd read it out loud and go, oh, I thought that was something else. But mostly I would say, where is it in the book? And they'd show me, and I'd say, read it out loud, and they'd read it out loud. And if they didn't get it then, I'd say, well, work the problem out loud. Let me just hear you work out loud what you're doing. Show your work. You always had to show your work, because if you don't do that in the later days, you're going to be lost in more complex problems. But I would have them just explain it. And pretty much they always went, oh, and at that point they were fine. And then they realized, I'm never going to get through with this stuff if I have to teach this old guy math along with doing my math. So they quit asking for my help for the most part. Occasionally they did, but they just realized they just need to follow the directions and work with it until their brain makes sense of it. It's frustrating sometimes. That's how learning goes, but it is incredibly possible and incredibly powerful. Okay, that's my speech. So what I want to do now is see what you want to add, Brooks or Jody, and see what kind of questions are popping up off to the side, or if anybody would like to call in and ask something, we can try to make that happen.
Yeah, it looks like there's a lot of questions on the side, and I have a class in 4 minutes, unfortunately. So I will say...
And say something brilliant.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and think of something pretty fast. I'm trying to think. Kind of what was most helpful for me was definitely being able to talk things out with someone when I'm really struggling with like a concept, for sure. When it comes to simple mistakes, I'll say this: I would rather make a simple mistake than totally not understand the problem. That's why I got it wrong. If those are the two options, yeah, I'd take the simple mistake. But that being said, there's still not an excuse, at least in my mind, for myself, there's not an excuse to make simple mistakes over and over and over again. It's fine to do that when you're practicing or when you're first learning something. That totally works, but you should be able to catch those. And the easiest way to catch them really is to go over your problems. Something my dad always emphasized for me as a kid was to check all my problems before I got graded. And days where I'd miss a lot of problems, pretty much there's always this correlation of I had not checked my problems for myself. And I mean, kids don't like this. I don't like checking my own problems even now, but I will say this. I check my problems even still when I take a test or whatever, as long as I have time at college. And a lot of times checking the problems is the difference between a B and an A for me. It's one problem that could have skewed something, because sometimes my test only has 10 questions. And if I miss one, that makes a big difference. And usually it is something dumb like, oh, I made an algebra mistake. I made an arithmetic mistake even. I just forgot, or I added two numbers instead of subtracting them. So checking your answers, like understanding things conceptually is really great. And that totally is the first step. But if you don't know as a child, if you don't learn how to check your own problems and how to objectively look, am I right or wrong about this, you're really going to struggle as you come into later stuff, because then that's where you're really going to have to spend a lot of time thinking about conceptual stuff. If you're spending so much energy on that and you don't have this background of being able to check these silly little mistakes you're making, you're really going to have a hard time. Plus, it just builds a great skill in all of life. I don't know a single subject or thing aspect in my job where I don't have to make sure I did everything right. It applies in writing, it applies in math, it applies in computer science and everything.
Now, don't scare them. You don't start with things being perfect, right?
No, I usually
start with
I expect to miss about 3 or 4 problems per like 20 or whatever. And I actually look for, I'm kind of surprised when I don't find anything wrong. I actually walk out of those tests more nervous than if I found 5 things wrong and I fixed all of them. So
we hear the famous chimes at the University of Texas in the background, I think. So. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, one of the things that Brooks is stressing, it's from carpentry. You measure twice and you cut once. You double check your work. That's really important. And number 2, we did talk through concepts. I do remember that. I remember once he was wrestling with something, but people make the mistake of wanting their children to understand math before they can do it. I personally think you ought to just do it first. And you know what? You learn to do it just rotely and mechanically, and your brain will start making sense of why it works. In fact, that's what happens. You go, oh, that's why it works that way. If you try to understand it first, you're going to be in a mess. Similar to swimming. You just don't really need to get Brooks is gone, I think. You really don't need to get thanks, Brooks. You don't need to get a whiteboard out, explain the physics of swimming. At some point, you have to just get in the water and work with it. And math is one of those subjects that has that interplay. Understanding's great, but learning to just do it mechanically first gives you a way in which to start thinking about it and understanding it. Jody, what do you remember?
I was trying to look over on the side and see what some people say. I'm so glad Brooks was there. I'm sorry he couldn't stay with us. We did not do math tests for quite a while with our kids, and then we started doing once a month. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of times there's weekly ones. That some of this is just up to you and your family and how you want to do things. I do think that at least once a month, giving a math test was important to kind of make sure they're.
Yeah, you're bringing up a really good point. Our reason for not giving is mostly my problem. I didn't want the kids tested so much early on that, first of all, I think American education is largely about gaming tests, and our approach was trying to teach them to learn how to learn. So I wasn't particularly interested in that. Second, I didn't want them to get locked in and think they were anything particular because of their early testing. Now, I think we waited too long, and we should have started doing, like you said, Jody, we did the math later, once a month. But you have to figure that out for yourself. But I was way less obsessed because I didn't want the kids to get locked in on some poor test results early on and go, oh, well, I'm just no good at whatever. I would much rather give them a chance to catch on. But eventually you do have to test them because that's going to follow them in life and schooling, and it creates a kind of focus as well. So, and you measure how they're doing. You can see
Right,
where they
because
are.
when they're doing their lessons, they have their books there. And a couple of things I just want to point out too. We did Saxon, we did RC. I know some people will say, well, did you do all the problems on every lesson, all the pre stuff and all? Yes, 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 yes. Don't skip. This is,
So, yeah, Jody, somebody's asking about what test that you did.
Oh, the Saxon tests. We actually never gave our children any aptitude type tests up until SAT stuff. Just
Right.
the math test in the Saxon books. And so by doing it once a month, this would just pick the tests that went the closest to how far they were, because you're skipping a couple of tests that way. So okay, you're on lesson 50, this test covers through 49 or whatever.
And we had situations where we got the kids to have to go back in time. Some of it was with a cheating issue or two. They had to go back and start over and redo something. I rarely made a child do a whole lesson over again. I don't remember that, Jody. Do you know? We may have if it was just so bad.
Right.
But usually we catch it much sooner than that. And by the way, if you use something besides Saxon, that's great. What we liked about Saxon was the philosophy of it being all math and it being a progressive dynamic, so that you're learning new stuff and reviewing old constantly and integrating it all. So it worked well for us as long as we kept the number of problems they were doing inside their skill set. So at the beginning of a new book, gosh, some of them could do almost 2 lessons a day. It seemed like they were just so easy because of so much review. But later on, we'd get down to a half lesson, wouldn't we, Jody? Or maybe 10 of 30 problems. Do you remember?
Yeah, and that didn't happen a lot. And also, if you do slow down, well, you're with the idea of picking back up. It's not like you just stay doing 10 problems for the next 3 years or something. You're constantly kind of monitoring your child and seeing where they are. And so you pick back up. We also had a goal of them finishing certain maths by the time they were graduate from high school. So you can kind of work backwards on that, depending, if your kids are in junior high and high school now, and where would you like them to get to, kind of plot out how that should be going. I just point out, we did do math in the summer and we did do math on Saturdays.
Oh yeah, we did do math on Saturdays. So they might take breaks, but for the most part, we found that math, if you stop math, you really lose it. It's like winding a ball of yarn. If you drop it, it really unravels a long way. And so we would do math 6 days a week. We didn't do the rest of school on Saturday, just math. And could they do it any time before supper? How'd we do that?
Well, I think we did have that, but we didn't. We did it in the mornings. Now, like if they spent the night away and things like that, there was always, okay, then you come do it as soon as you're back home. It wasn't like we tried to.
So I did it in the morning, first thing, get out of the way. However, we did have a thing that if you found a volunteer event, picking up trash on the road, serving your church, scout troop thing, there were other neighborhood, and if it was volunteerism and serving other people, you could skip math on Saturdays. So we had a value that we kind of played out that they could get a break on. What was funny about Saturday is they almost always would do their math in nearly half the time they did during the week. It may not have been that dramatic, but it was pretty close. They were very focused on Saturday to get it done and get on with their day. True?
Right. Yes.
Funny. Focus. Hey, if someone wants to, I'm going to look over here. Someone's asking about different editions from the original. Sherry, I know you're on here, and I know you know about the additions. Jody, you may. Somebody might want to post that for Dustin about which additions to use, as just wasn't my forte or focus. Do you remember, Jody? There's some debate about the later editions.
Yeah, I didn't have any. I was just recently got them all out. And we have some different editions of different ones. We have some that go back to a lot that are the first editions. I don't know. Somebody else probably has a thought on that. The few that I saw didn't change. I didn't remember them changing that much, but I'm sure somebody out there maybe has looked into that more. We would always buy the homeschool packs once they started buying it that had the solution manuals in there, you know, not just the answers, but the solution manuals, and found that very helpful.
Yeah, so somebody's wondering if the second edition is good enough of Saxon. Here's Sherry's telling us second edition. I wonder if I could post this. That would be so cool. Second edition is useful for having little numbers per problem that can cue the student for what lesson the concept was taught.
Oh yeah, I do remember that. That was nice.
Right. So now, if anybody wants to dare log in, there are 27 of you that apparently have cameras according to this. Do it. You do a question over here. You can do it over here. I'm kind of catching on to this, but you know, this is kind of the value of this format, this blabbing, so we can not only repost it, but we can interact. You know, what I'm trying to stress is if you're trying to teach math the same way you might expect to teach literature or some of these other things where people will make sense of it later on, it's not going to happen. Math, you've got to actually go back and get the first principles and build on them. Many subjects do that. Languages do that, I promise you. Having studied 5 languages, I was lost always in the beginning, and then they came together. Well, you know, the way the brain works and all the rest. So language in particular is given to that gestalt filling in the gap thing later. Math is not. Math is linear and progressive, it's stair step. You've got to learn those first principles. And by the way, that's how confidence grows. Greater part of courage is having done it before. And so with math, you've got to figure out where they are and build from there. So Jody wrote testing them once a month. Yeah, you might want to answer these out loud when you see one.
Okay. Well, some of them we have.
So how do you say it again?
I thought some of this would be repetition. That's why I was just typing. I think some people had missed some of that, but go ahead.
Well, that's fine. Okay, that's great. Never mind. So how do I get my daughter to be less careless? She does recheck her work prior to grading, but has been consistent with careless mistakes. What do we do? So you're not remembering?
Yeah.
So what we did is we graded them. We would count half off for little careless mistakes. Isn't that right, Jody?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So we would count off, and you'd have to. What do we do? They redid the problem.
Yeah, they had to redo all the problems they missed.
Yeah. So they had to redo the problems they missed. We were persnickety about that. That may be mean. If they didn't put pounds down, that's not an answer if it's requiring pounds. Isn't that right, Jody?
Right.
Because that's how they're going to do it in college. One hopes. I don't know how they're doing it now. But we would, the trick to getting more accurate is to have a consequence for it. Generally, if you see sloppiness continuing, it's because it's being rewarded. So basically what you're wanting to do is say, all right, we're going to do less problems so you can be careful and go back and check over it. But if you miss it, you have to do the whole problem over, and they may know how to do the problem. They just didn't write pounds. Most humans don't like to keep doing that. Right. That is not efficient for them. So you're wanting to give them accurate feedback. That's the trick. If you hit a golf ball and you can see where it goes, that gives you feedback. If you hit golf balls at night, you never know where they go. That's not a good way to learn to hit a golf ball. There may be no good way to learn, but you get my point. So
The
what else?
falling below 90%, Fred was saying earlier, I'm hearing myself.
You're doing good.
Okay. You know, it's an average of maybe like you take a 2 weeks average or something. And if they're not getting up to that 90%, we would, one of the things we would do is cut back on the number of problems. And for a time, not forever. And so they had more time, you know, within the 2-hour time period, they have obviously more time to focus on each problem, time to check each problem. And with the aim of getting back to that 90% and then bumping them back up.
And as a rule of thumb, let me interject, we would, I think what I recall is we would go back about 25%. So I wouldn't cut, you know, I wouldn't go back halfway, but I'd go back a bit.
Yes.
To see how they did. And what Jody said is crucial. You want to set this up as an experiment. So let's do 1 month of half problems or 1 month of 20 of 30 problems. And in that month, or maybe you just want to do it for 2 weeks, it doesn't matter, but set a time period because your student is going to be able to tolerate knowing there's an end in view to see how it goes. It's an experiment. That's what you want to do. And so that experiment is going to give you some valuable information.
There was a few times we had them repeat the whole lesson, but not often. I'm looking at that. Because it wasn't the average of the 90% wasn't a day average. It was more like a 2-week average. And we had a way of charting it out. There were a few times they had to go back and do the whole lesson, but just because they missed so many on that, you could tell they've missed something, but not often. Usually it was just redo the daily, correct the problems you missed that day. That day, correct them, not the next day or whatever. You know, you do your lesson, you get checked, you correct.
So did you have them repeat the whole lesson if they dropped below 80?
That's what I was saying. There was not a couple of times I can remember somebody having to do a whole lesson, but it wasn't often. And even, yeah, I don't know. And everybody just has to figure some of this stuff out themselves and their own kids. And there was one thing about Brooks. He was so diligent that in the higher maths, I would catch him. I mean, he was mostly doing him monitoring himself at this point. He's in high school. And I will have realized he had been working on one problem for 30, 45 minutes or something. And I'm like, Brooks, get up, walk away, and reboot your brain. But the way he was just going to sit there and work. Well, his brain had just stuck. And so you've got to know your own kids. You've got to know, you know, a couple other times I can remember one of our friends' kids just sitting there for hours working on one problem or something. Well, back when they're little, you know, he's just shucking and jiving. There wasn't, you know, the point isn't to back up and back up and back up and back up to where your kid's doing 2 problems a day. You know, there's some discipline here. There's some, this is what we do. Like I said, especially once they're junior high and high school, you might want to look at what math you want them to get through and kind of work backwards as to how long you think that should be taking them. You know, you don't want your kid in algebra 1 for 3 years. Something's up. You got to figure, you know.
Well, you know, I remember this young man who was at our house. I think he was probably 11 when I had this conversation with him. Anyway, he was sitting there and he was just staring at a problem, and he was doing like one problem every half hour, you know, or something like that. And we were the parent. I don't know what had happened, but he was staying with us, or we were helping him school for a while. We've had a number of kids that we've taken into school for a period of months, usually because of a dire illness of a parent, something like that. But what I did is I showed him. You might find this helpful. I would set up what is called a structural tension for him, and it would be a structural tension is a relationship between where you want to go, the there, and where you are, the here. Okay. And so I looked at him. I said, so how many problems you got to do today? And let's say he said 25. And I said, so right over here, number 25. He'd say, yeah. And I said, where are you now? He'd say number 3. And I'd say, so you're on number 3, right? He said, yeah. And I'd say, and where are you trying to go? And he'd say 25. And I'd say, so you're trying to go 25. Yes. And you're on 3. I know that I'm being obnoxious, but you have to do this. because you set up that contrast and it generates focus. In our focus course, I go through this material. And so generating that kind of focus allows them to realize that I would then add time. And I say, I tell you what, I know where you're trying to go. I'm going to come back in 10 minutes and see how many problems you've got done. Ready? Go. So he knew the next problem was number 4. He got going. And, when I'd come back in 10 minutes, he would have done 3, 4, 5. So that time, focus, where do you want to get to? Where are you starting? Time limit game is really important. You just got to bring it into their conscious,
right.
Awareness, as it were. So what else are we seeing?
Yeah, I appreciate different people answering different people. Thanks.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so what I'm wondering is what questions, about your own kids, your own situation, that'd be great if someone dared, let me just ask you some questions about what is it you're facing? Because that usually is a real live example. Instead of us talking hypothetically, we can deal with something in the real world. And a lot of times this is an issue of, we don't like the complaining, we don't like the griping, we look at the frustration, we love our babies, we don't want them to suffer, you go down the list. And the truth is that even though all that is true, it's not all that's true. And you're going to help generate a lot more pain for them in their future if you don't get them to settle down and start learning the math. And the reason children complain, I'll tell you a little secret. The reason children complain is because they think it will work. You're taking notes. You might want to write that down. They think it will work. Once a child knows for a fact that they're going to have to do math, they're not getting out of math. Math is going to be a part of their future. They can settle down and start learning it. But as long as they think there's a chance, they'll keep complaining, try to get out of it. Oh, it doesn't have any reason why I gave the 11 reasons or 11 starter reasons why math is valuable. So what else are we seeing? I just need to tackle the careless mistakes.
Fred, do you see the long one starting out with my daughters in 5th grade?
I do. Do you want to read that aloud?
Well,
for the audio?
Are they not seeing these? Do they see it? Okay. I can.
So
somebody
what
might
we're
not.
doing, Jody, so what we're doing is we're going to publish this later, and I don't know that these things on the side are in this video.
Thank
so
you.
If you read it out loud, it's for people in the future.
Got it. Thanks. Okay. My daughter is in 5th grade. She was in public school with an IEP from grades 1 through 3. Oh, wait, jumped. I'm still trying to figure out gaps. She was in tears daily with Saxon 5.4, and after 2 years, I decided to change to Life of Fred for the remaining of the year. Next year, we'll be doing both Fred and teaching textbooks. Sometimes I struggle with the fear that she'll never catch up. Should I have her take the Saxon placement test to find out where the gaps are?
Maybe. The trick is, there's a great sentence here. Sometimes I struggle with the fear that she'll never catch up. In my mind, I don't think you want to think about her catching up. I don't think that's I don't think it's a useful way to think. It's not how I thought. After struggling and wrestling it through, I think what you want to think about is, where are they and how can we improve them? So we had 2 children. Well, let's be honest, Jody. Brooks, Tripp finished calculus, right? And went on, right? Forrest finished calculus. Brooks finished calculus. True?
Mm-hmm.
Laura did not finish calculus.
No.
Laura and Holmes, did he do calculus?
I was trying to remember. I can't remember about Holmes.
I can't either. So, and the reason was there was some cheating with those 2 that went on, so they had to back up and they weren't getting things. But what I'm trying to suggest is, rather than thinking about them getting caught up, you want them to become an expert to the point they're at. Wherever they are, they should be good at that. and then get them some more, and then get them some more, and then get them some more. Now, I know I may be running into problems with requirements in the state, et cetera. So that would be another conversation about what they need to have studied. But from a math viewpoint, they're going to be better off, even if it's an outside homework game. If you want to do the other math, fine. Get them to start over back in another book and start doing a lower level so they can catch up. If you'll think this way and get a child to become kind of an expert up to the point they're at, maybe it's just sixth grade math, but they at least know that, that's the foundation. And from there, improve and add, and there, improve and add. Rather than trying to think they're so far behind, how they're going to catch up. This young man I was telling you about, I didn't know if we'd ever catch him up, and I wasn't concerned about it. I was concerned about him learning the math he knew and learning a little more. And that multiplies. Suddenly kids can launch and get to places you never imagined pretty fast because it all starts coming together. But unless you think of it progressively and stair step, you're going to be tempted to hope it just fits together in their brain someday. That's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
And he was not happy about our suggestion of putting him back several grade levels in math. It was embarrassing to him, I'm sure. But once he understood that that's what was going to happen to him, that his parents were all for it and nothing else was going to happen until he learned this math, he got with the program and did fine.
Exactly.
And Sherry's right, going back and making sure they know the basic math facts. Excellent point on that. Takes out a lot of frustrations for the children.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Okay, any more questions? Nobody's brave enough to talk, but let's see. Great advice. Thanks so much. I do feel pressured with state exams, and I do get that. But honestly, even that is going to be related to their confidence. And their confidence is going to come by getting earlier concepts down and building on it. And I wish there's another way to go. But I'm going to stress this, if you think of math like writing or reading, that they'll get the story, by the time they understand how it turned out, they can piece it together. Math doesn't piece together, it builds. It's like trying to build a skyscraper and you're not going to put in a couple of floors. I mean, how could you do that? It won't work.
And just like with this little girl that's struggling and all, I would just say, just try different things and try getting her to read you the lesson out loud and explain, and let her just explain what she's doing to you, and just see if it's a comprehension problem from the reading, or if she's got some kind of gap in the math, maybe she hasn't learned the facts, or I would just try some different things to build her confidence up, back up on the problems, go slower, whichever math you're using, whether you're using Saxon or whatever you're using, just try some different things to build her confidence in math.
Exactly. So we've had 143 people, it looks like, have signed up, which is awesome. And this is something I think we can do pretty regularly on different topics if you think this would be helpful. If you are not in our newsletter process, just at least hear from when we're doing things like this, you want to go to college-ready.com, www.college-ready.com. And if you wait a second, I think it'll pop up and you can sign on for some homeschooling videos we did all for free. And that'll get you in an email list. Okay, you can unsubscribe anytime. I'm not going to hassle you. You can turn it off. But if you want to know about these kind of things, that's how you do it. www.college-ready.com. Let's see what else. Finally, Jody, even if I read it to
really
them,
appreciate everybody helping out here on the right side, answering questions. And I get the idea of us saying it out loud, because that might not be on the replay. Don't give up. Be positive.
Yeah, and endure. And I promise you, they can learn it. And really, if your goal is just for them to learn a little more than what they know right now, you're going to be on an amazing path with math. If you're trying to get them to catch up to their friends, you're going to be frustrated. If you want them to catch up with Brooks, you're going to be real frustrated. Because what he didn't tell you, he's met a 4.0 both semesters, basically, and taken 16 hours and working a full-time job and added a girlfriend into the mix, who's a very sweet young lady. And, you know, he's just one of these weird people that both gets math and is very disciplined on working on things. And he's not the standard, you know, he's got his thing. Everybody has their little genius they can do, and you're wanting to help your child figure that out. But on math, they can learn more than what they know. So you figure out what they know, get them to be good at that, and then add some and add some and add some. Whatever you get them to is going to exponentially help them. I promise. It just will. I've done this too many times in tutoring kids and seeing it with our own kids. Oh yeah, thank you for posting where to go to sign up. Let's see. So in order to figure out where they are, do the Saxon test. Yeah, they asked that earlier. I think that works. There are probably other tests you can take. That'd be an easy thing to Google. It's just what we did. It was easy enough for us to tell. You know, by the time you probably can take even SAT practice tests. If anybody else has another idea, throw it out there. But almost any math test that's in an algebra level is helpful.
And we did not do the placement test. We did the routine chapter test, or however they're put out. Like I said, we would do one a month. So I would just say they'd gone through lesson 50 and the test number 4 goes through 49, then that's the test I gave them. But the placement test, sure, use the placement test. I'm sure will be with our handy tools.
Honestly, Jody, you'll remember situations where all I did was open the book and had them work a problem.
I was just about to say, I've seen you, yeah, just kind of quiz them that way.
I can tell pretty quickly. I just go back and see if they can do it. If they can work a problem in a certain area, I just go back to the book. I'll know.
Right.
It's kind of common sense.
Like I said, we did do math year round, even with gaps of vacations or whatever. We did not feel like math needed to be one of those things you didn't do for 2 or 3 months, because you do get so far behind. And the beginning of each new math book is pretty much review. So we would go a lot faster at the beginning of any, so they just started any new Saxon book. A lot of times they'd be doing 2 lessons a day at that point, just because they could. It's review.
I'm writing this down. I want to mention something about Common Core real quick. If they're failing at 20 problems, go to 15, something like that. So Common Core. I unfortunately have an echo now. Can you do that, Jody?
No.
So it's just me. So Common Core. I'm not getting in a fight, but I want to try to say something positive about Common Core, though I think it's a bad idea. Okay, so I read a monolith out of Missouri, one of the colleges in Missouri, where someone or monograph, not a monolith, had written an explanation of what was going on in Common Core thinking and what was driving it. I usually think people are trying to do good things, and what was driving in the math stuff, because I started looking the way they're doing problems, and it's just weird. It's just bizarre and time consuming and irritating and useless. These are all my opinions, the way some of these problems are worked out. What it was driven by, if you're a conspiracy theorist, they're trying to dumb us down so they can control us, so aliens can eat us or whatever. Something's going to happen bad, okay? But if you're more like the way I think, which people are just good people up to no good, they've got a bad idea. Their bad idea is that children need more help with learning how to be creative in their problem solving. So it's generating ways to try to look at problems in weird ways. So they're trying to broaden their ability to solve problems. This is why I have a whole course on problem solving and why it's connected to math, because understanding how problems really work doesn't allow you to get tempted into that weirdness. You know, just coming up with a bunch of ideas. It's like people say, you know, children are so much creative. 5-year-olds, 95% of the time come up with curious answers or creative answers to questions. And by the time you're 44, only 5% of your answers are creative. Well, look, no 5-year-old writes a symphony. Okay. So just get over that weirdness. You know, children just don't know how to answer questions. Yeah, they're imaginative. They're just making up stuff. And making up stuff is part of life. But just because you make up something doesn't mean it's any good. That's not the way to go. And so with math, trying to think that way to say, well, we want them to look at it a lot of different ways to stimulate their problem solving. It's just simply, we've been educating people a long time. Go back to the Greeks, the Renaissance, you go on. We know how to educate people. That's not how to do it. That's just a pseudo theory that's going to fail, already failing. What you want to do is build a foundation. And when they have the foundation, they've got the tools with which to think. And then there are other ways that they can learn to problem solve. But Common Core's desire, I think, might have been well meant, but it won't prove out to work because it absolutely contradicts everything we know about how humans learn. I'm overstated that, but you get my point. If I call in, does that put me on the screen, new to all this, but want to be ready for our next chat? Yes, Sherry, it will put you on the screen the same way. So you call in and I can accept it. And if you have it may, if with a microphone, just let you have a microphone, but it probably wants to do the picture too, so we can have a face-to-face conversation. So you need to make yourself presentable and not sit in a messy room. Okay.
Okay, somebody was asking about math videos. We never used any, so I have really no comment on that. So somebody else needs to speak up about using videos. We just didn't.
Well, most of my courses are videos on how to teach, so that can work. The trick is, by the time you get a math teacher or tutor, and I'm for tutors because homeschooling is tutoring technically. You think about it, it's a small student teacher ratio. But basically, a math teacher is going to try to explain and teach math to a child. And while that's fine, that tempts, I think, a child or student to lean on that person. If the goal of the teacher is to cause them to learn, that's on target for what a teacher should be doing. If the goal of a teacher is just to teach it, that's not what I would call good teaching. So really, you're wanting a child or a student to figure out for him or herself what's going on. And so someone mentioned earlier the aha moments. Those can happen all the time. You know, a lot of education is, oh yeah, moments. Oh yeah, let's do that. I forgot that. But there are ahas as you put it together, but you're really wanting a child to become a self-teacher. And a good teacher, a good tutor, is facilitating that. You can go back and look at the Greeks and the history of it. You can look at Jesus. It was a tutoring model. And mostly, yes, he did some instruction, but if you'll notice, most of it was asking questions, giving some parallel, and trying to get them to make sense of things. And most of the time, they didn't for a while, but eventually they got it. Someone, let's see, another perspective, I excelled. I lost it. Scrolled up. I have another perspective. I excel with teachers who walk me through the logic behind otherwise abstract problems. However, my sons get very frustrated if I show them the story behind the math method and only want me to show them the answer. Yeah. So usually abstraction comes later in life. I don't know if this is true, Dawn. I'm not sure names. I just see emails here. But generally, abstract concepts are later education. It's usually college or late high school because of the cortex getting formed. Just the whole way we can handle abstraction later on. So that can be fun and unique. You know, some personalities enjoy that more. Your sons, if they get very frustrated, they probably need to get over that because you get to teach how you want to. When they grow up, they teach people, they can teach how they want to. So it's kind of fair. Yeah, in general, you want them to nail down, not just showing them the answer, but them figuring out the answer. And then I like throwing that in. I think there's nothing more fun than showing the Pythagorean theorem by drawing a triangle and actual squares and the little squares in them, and show that the sum of the two squares equal the actual square area of the hypotenuse. It actually, you go, oh, well, that's what it is. I didn't understand that till I got out of college. It just never crossed my mind. So I'm with you. That stuff's cool. But I think what I did is I threw it in. Jody would tell you periodically, probably not all the time. Is that true, Jody?
Right. Yes.
So I'm cheering for you. Sherry laughed at the be presentable. All right, gang, we've gone over an hour. This is enough for now. Really fun. I hope you find it helpful, and we'll see if we can't do more of these and have some discussions, because honestly, the nature of this is where real learning occurs. We not only get ideas, but even expressing what you think allows you to crystallize what you're saying. So we're for you. We love you. We're cheering for you. Your kids are going to make a difference in this nation, because they're not going to have a lot of competition once they learn to teach themselves how to teach themselves. So God bless.
Bye, everybody. Thanks. Bye, everybody. Thanks.